The world's jungles are home to some of the most amazing natural phenomena known to man. From the humid Amazon rainforest to the incredible biodiversity of Borneo, jungles serve as habitats for creatures large and small. But whilst jungles can indeed be places of fascination, they can also be extremely dangerous. Mother Nature is unpredictable and often unforgiving. Venture into the jungle without the proper equipment, and it is likely that you will come to an untimely end. Yet, there are many tales of intrepid explorers surviving the harsh climates of the world's jungles in the most unlikely ways. From animals running to an adventurer's aid, to peculiar plants helping those lost, jungles have spared some souls from an untimely demise. But there have also been some occasions where people have never returned from the jungle, and we may never know why. So today we'll be taking a look at some ventures into the jungle and their stories behind them. Woman 27 found after 20 years lost in the jungle. The Cambodian jungle is full in history with ancient kingdoms hidden amongst the thick shrubbery and tall trees. But as we know all too well on this channel, with history comes mystery. On January 13, 2007, a woman by the name of Rokung Penang unexpectedly surfaced from the deep Cambodian jungle. Her story really is quite something. Rokum's disappearance had been shrouded in mystery for the better part of 19 years. Her last known whereabouts were 200 miles away from Cambodia's capital, Phnom Penh, a stone's throw away from the Vietnamese border. Nobody quite knew how or when she had gone missing, or whether she had family outside of the jungle. But naturally, most presumed that she had perished after suddenly vanishing in the 1990s, succumbing to the wild beasts that rule the unforgiving Cambodian jungle. Rokham was only found after being caught by a trap set by a local villager who had been hoping to catch the thief stealing his food. Yet, he was in for a shock when he discovered a naked and skeleton-like woman crouched on all fours at his doorstep. How anybody would be able to recognize her was the outstanding question. After all, Rokham barely looked human. Many wondered whether she was actually just a lost native jungle woman, but as it transpired, she was not. Shortly after this seemingly miraculous discovery, a 45-year-old man named Sal Lu came forward and claimed to be the father of the lone survivor. His suspicions were confirmed after noticing a scar on the woman's arm, which supposedly was from an accident she'd had before going missing, to that of her mother's, Rokham Soy. The natural step after this was to test for a DNA match, which the family were all for. Although interestingly, these tests never came to fruition as the family pulled out not long after. Why they pulled out is not known, but it raises questions. After returning to her family's home, Rokham began the lengthy and turbulent process of becoming accustomed to the modern way of living. That is to say, after 19 years of hunter-gatherer lifestyle, a lot of work was needed if she was ever to become a functioning member of society. Unfortunately, this task proved more difficult than originally thought. Her family had to stop her from escaping back into the jungle multiple times. In fact, she even managed to escape successfully only a couple of months after her discovery, but was found swiftly. The game of cat and mouse continued sporadically over the years, but generally, her condition was improving with the occasional relapse. She even began to speak some of the native language and was also being visited by psychologists regularly to develop her social skills. It was evident her family's determination and persistence were not for nothing. With that said, Rokham's story took an unexpected turn when in 2016, 3 years after the death of Sal Lu, a Vietnamese man by the name of Pel proclaimed that the missing girl was his own daughter, Tak. He was able to identify the woman by her unique features and provided relevant documentation to the authorities. After a review by officials, it was confirmed that he was indeed the father, and she returned with her new family, or should I say old family, back to Vietnam, thereby drawing the mystery to a close. Quite why Sal Lu had been so determined to take Rokham in is strange, if not a little disturbing. Lost tourists as monkeys saved him in the Amazon. The Bolivian Amazon encompasses long, deep rivers, dense canopied jungle, and mountainous terrain. It is not a place for the faint-hearted, to say the least. Fog often blankets the jungle, intertwining its way between the trees. Locals allege that the jungle can swallow you in seconds if you are not careful. Despite the dangers of the Amazon, it has proved a popular tourist destination, at least for those who enjoy an adventure. One of these people was a Chilean man named Michael Caroccio Acuna, who, it is fair to say, got more than he bargained for on his guided excursion. One day, rangers in the area received a call explaining that Michael had, quite literally, vanished into thin air. Despite a few hazy reports of seeing him on the steps of his cabin around 8:30 p.m., the previous nobody had any idea where Michael had gone. He had not left any obvious tracks behind, nor had he told any of the traveling party that he had intentions to leave. Initially, it was believed that the people on the excursion tour were playing some sort of sick prank, but the disappearance struck an unsettling chord for the rangers. Michael's disappearance, even in its early stages, was similar to that of Israeli tourist Yossi Ginsberg, who became stranded in the Bolivian Amazon for 3 weeks. Rangers hoped that Michael would not have to try to survive for that long. When rangers reached Michael's camp, the tour guides explained that whilst he had not announced his intentions to go AWOL, Michael had been acting rather strangely. He had refused to take part in a traditional ceremony called Pasha Mama, instead returning to his cabin. Upon the group's arrival back at the camp, Michael was nowhere to be seen. Locals to the area then explained something unsettling. The people of the lowlands of Bolivia are very spiritual, and they believed that Michael had been taken by a disgruntled spirit called Duende for not participating in the Pasha Mama ritual. Whilst locals tried to summon Duende back with Michael using a series of ritualistic practices, rangers searched for over a week for the Chilean. The key breakthrough was the discovery of a sock seemingly belonging to Michael, which the locals then used to break into his soul and furthered their attempts to bring him back. After 9 days, the search party saw something that they simply did not believe was possible. On the riverbank, Michael was standing alive and well, sort of with a stick in his hand. He had somehow survived 9 days in the jungle all alone. But how? Michael claimed that when he had got lost, he could not find the river. Instead, he followed a group of monkeys who guided him to water sources and dropped him fruit along the way. He was then suddenly overcome with an overwhelming desire to return back to the camp and somehow found his way there. Michael, as far as we know, is alive and well. The locals believe that he could not have survived alone in the jungle, however, no matter the monkey's health. Perhaps there was some divine intervention after it. Family survives 34 days in Peru jungle eating berries. As the old adage goes, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. However, for one family of 4, the destination was everything. After a pleasant visit to relatives near the border of Peru and Colombia in late 2019, a family of 4, which consisted of a mother and her 3 young children, made the slow trek to Porto Lugísimo, in neighboring Colombia. The original plan was to meet up with the father in Colombia. However, this was not meant to be. During the journey, the mother lost her sense of direction and veered off the planned route, becoming completely lost near the Patameo River. Things escalated quickly, and they became stranded in the midst of the dense Peruvian jungle, with no means of contacting the outside world. Hope was quickly waning. Their primal instincts kicked in, and they soon realized that they could sustain themselves by foraging the jungles for anything to eat, such as seeds, berries, and fruits, anything to keep going. They also tried to maintain at least some sense of direction by following the Patamaya River, which brought them into Peru unwittingly. Meanwhile, upon realizing his family may have suffered some grave misfortune after not showing up at the agreed meeting point, the father raised the alarm with the authorities, and a search began. It was starting to look hopeful that the family could come out of this alive, with the full might of search parties coupled with their good instincts. But it is probably a good idea to mention how long the family were in the jungle for. 34 whole days surviving alone in the wilderness. After 34 days of hunter-gatherer lifestyle, the family were finally found. Although not by authorities as you would expect, but by members of a Peruvian indigenous group called the Sequoia on the outskirts of a village called Yabito. The members swiftly alerted the appropriate authorities, and before they knew it, the family were being whisked away by a hovercraft 110 miles to the original destination of Porto Leguizamo. There the family were reunited with the father in an emotional scene that was televised to the nation. Although it all ended well, the tolls of the jungle were not easily forgotten. All four were dehydrated, malnourished and smothered in insect bites, with some barely able to stand on their own 2 feet. They were fortunate, though, receiving hospital treatment and testing for any of the vicious diseases that call the jungle home, such as malaria and dengue fever. There is no doubt that this was a remarkable feat of survival, especially considering this was a mother with her 3 young children to support. I think it is safe to say this goes to show that sometimes the journey is not always the best part of life. What do you make of these 3 incredible stories, and could you survive? There's a lot to be said about the world's loneliest continent, and the frozen tundra has been a goldmine for strange and interesting discoveries over the last 100 years. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 Antarctic discoveries. NASA finds massive gravity anomaly buried under Antarctica. NASA's satellites have noticed a gravity anomaly sitting within a 300-mile-wide crater buried deep underneath Antarctica's ice, seemingly consistent with the giant asteroid impact that caused the Permian-Triassic extinction roughly 250 million years ago. The asteroid triggered a mass extinction that lasted nearly 2 million years. Starting this crater is estimated to be almost 3 times the Chicxulub crater size, which is the asteroid impact that killed off the dinosaurs. Scientists believe that this crater was formed even before East Antarctica's coastal Cretaceous formation. NASA and the German Aerospace Center ran a 15-year-long mission to measure gravity anomalies throughout the planet and discover how its mass is distributed and changes over time. The joint mission was called the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment, or GRACE, and ran from March 2002 to October 2017. They sent satellites that would detect any subtle shifts in the Earth's magnetic and gravity fields. Gravitational force is affected by mass, so any changes indicate a redistribution of mass, something large enough to alter it. GRACE sent 2 satellites into orbit at the same altitudes, one trailing the other, and circled the poles about 15 times every day. In 2006, a group of researchers examined data from these satellites when they noticed an anomaly below Antarctica's ice. Using GRACE's records, they determined that the anomaly was due to a massive crater that had been buried for millions of years, most likely from an asteroid impact. The discovery has instigated a flurry of theories, with the most popular being the existence of 1930s and 1940s German bases. Theorists claim that Germany built secret hideouts in the continent during that time, evidenced by the multiple entrances that exist around Antarctica. They argue that the Germans were building UFOs because the entrance's size required you to fly in a saucer-shaped vessel. In 1991, the KGB revealed classified documents from the U.S. Navy's Operation High Jump, which proved they had sent numerous missions to the Antarctic during the 1970s. The theorists say that although the Navy claimed they were only researching the continent, they were there to investigate an entrance that supposedly led to the inner Earth. Thousands of sailors and crew were dispatched over the years, allowing rumors of UFO bases, German hideouts, and portals to the underworld to grow. Scientists, though, argue that the mysterious anomaly is an impact crater. The massive Wilkesland gravity anomaly is about 151 miles wide and reaches a minimum depth of 2,700 feet. Researchers believe that a giant asteroid could have impacted the Antarctic and initiated the Permian-Triassic extinction, which was the largest extinction of life in Earth's history, killed 96% of all sea creatures, and about 70% of the land-dwelling vertebrate organisms, much more catastrophic than what killed the dinosaurs. The collision would have caused drastic climate changes and created a challenging environment to live in, resulting in many species to have lost their lives. Since the crater is covered by miles of thick glacial ice, researchers have not been able to test it or pull samples properly. They have only been able to quickly inspect it based on its magnetic and gravitational anomalies. Scientists have no accurate way to figure out what is buried deep within Antarctica's ice, so it will remain a mystery until they do. Substance found in Antarctic ice may solve a Martian mystery. Deep within an ice core from Antarctica, scientists discovered a mineral that is commonly found on the planet Mars. Researchers are ecstatic as it reveals a little bit more about Mars' history and its similarities with Earth. The mineral, known as jarosite, is a brittle, yellow-brown substance forged when dust gets trapped in early ice deposits. The research team was not expecting to find jarosite during their expedition. Instead, they were looking for records of Ice Age cycles. By taking a 1,620-meter-long ice core, the researchers would examine the minerals and see detailed layers of the Earth's history within the past few thousand years. They did not expect to find dust deep in the core. The team measured how it absorbed X-rays and examined them under electron microscopes to confirm the mineral's identity. The NASA Opportunity rover first found jarosite on Mars in 2004. The rover discovered the mineral because it had driven over finely ground layers of it. It was a groundbreaking discovery as jarosite needs iron, potassium, sulfate, acidic conditions, and water to form. The planet is covered in thick deposits of jarosite, revealing just how crucial glaciers were in forming its valleys and land. The leading theory is that Mars was once covered in massive ice deposits billions of years ago. Dust accumulated under the ice sheets and eventually transformed into jarosite. The dust found in the Antarctic ice core was cracked and smoothed, revealing it had been formed and eroded from chemicals while in the ice. This suggests that the jarosite found on Mars had been created in the same way, providing a window into the planet's water-limited and acidic weathering. Geologists explain that even though only tiny jarosite particles were found in Antarctica's ice core, it is still a crucial discovery. The mineral is created from dust, which Antarctica only receives a small amount from the other continents. Mars, on the other hand, is full of dust, encouraging the formation of jarosite. Researchers want to investigate further whether Mars's ancient glaciers incited the creation of other minerals as well, contributing to the planet's entire chemical makeup. They just never expected the deep ice in Antarctica to be the most crucial link to the Martian environment. We are now one step closer to understanding Mars's chemical makeup and formation process. A huge polynear hole appears in Antarctica's sea ice. Despite being in the dead of Antarctica's sub-zero winter with frozen-over oceans, massive holes have been opening up in Antarctica's sea ice and puzzling scientists for decades. Their most recent occurrence was during the 2016 and 2017 winters, but researchers have been aware of them even in the 1970s. Now they've finally figured out why and how they exist. These holes are called polynears, which is Russian and translates to hole in the ice. They are massive, with the smallest one being roughly South Carolina's size, which covers just over 32,000 square miles. To figure out why they were forming, researchers used various creative methods to gather data on the ocean and ice. They placed floats throughout the Southern Ocean with sensors to produce a record of the climate quality and measure its variability during the winter season. Researchers even attached sensors to elephant seals, placing them on their heads to gather data on the ocean underneath the ice. These sensors help the scientists understand how the ocean water gets mixed up while below the surface, drawing the cold water down and bringing the relatively warmer water to the top. This water that rises is then hot enough to melt the ice. For these giant voids to open up in the ice, many environmental components need to come together at the right time. Surprisingly, the formation of polonias is not a gradual process. It appears without notice. Suddenly, the ice gives way and a giant hole appears in the middle of the floating ice, despite it being some meters thick. Scientists have also considered the impact that moored rise has on the formation of polonias. This massive mountain lies under the water near the holes and is large enough to intensify the water's movement, sending warm water to the surface. Despite the mountain's colossal size, proximity, and potential influence, researchers note that poloniers do not occur every year. They finally figured out that violent storms play a critical role in the formation of poloniers. The Southern Ocean is a dangerous area during the winter, as storms occur nearly every day and with hurricane-force gales. The strong winds attack the ice, blowing through its cracks and constantly rocking it. It agitates the water under the ice, forcing the cold water layer down and pushing the warm and saltier water up. The winds increase the water's movement, causing the ice to melt. Some winters have had the storms and wind occurring closer to the continent than others, pummeling the ice and water so much that the polyneirs end up forming. Scientists reveal that the amount of heat coming from the rising water is substantial and damaging. When polyneirs occur, they release massive amounts of hot air into the atmosphere, which then affects weather patterns worldwide. If a hole is large enough, it can even affect the tropics' rain patterns for a few years. As climate change worsens and the Earth's atmosphere alters, scientists expect the winter storms around Antarctica to grow even stronger. The strengthening of winds means more polyneirs in the ice, potentially making their way towards Antarctica's ice shelves. These shelves hold the glaciers over the ocean. More holes could dramatically increase the threat on the deteriorating ice masses. But what do you make of these 3 Antarctica discoveries and their impact upon us? Countless number of photographs had been taken over the years. Although in the majority of these document things in our lives that we understand, some are unexplainable. One mysterious photograph is this one that allegedly shows a ghost. Security firm boss Adam Lee was notified that his motion sensor camera had picked up some movement out of construction sites in Birmingham. He said he logged onto his laptop to see what the camera had picked up, and to his surprise, he saw a mysterious woman in white. A full patrol of the area was done in order to see if it was a break-in, but security guards reported that no one could be found in the area. There was no sign of any intruders. Mr. Lees, who is managing director of Liminalo Securities, said the following: "I have no idea what it is, but it freaked me out for sure. We provide security for hundreds of building sites across the Midlands. If anything moves on our site, the camera takes a picture. It works in infrared and alerts one of our guards. The security guards went out straight away. It was within minutes and there was no sound of anybody there or of anybody ever being there. It was really bizarre. I have no idea what it could have been, but I didn't sleep for the rest of the night and it gave me the shivers, that's for sure. I've never believed in ghosts, but I can't explain this. People have been saying it's fake, but I can assure them that it's 100% genuine. Some people have said this image shows the famous White Lady ghost, saying that this is one of the clearest images that's ever been taken of her. For those unaware, thousands of people have reported seeing strange sightings of a ghostly female figure, with long black hair wearing a long white gown, with many different origin stories of the spirit featuring tragic tales, but that all these spirits appear all across the world in many different countries, completely isolated from the myth all across history. This has led many to believe that a White Lady ghost, as the phenomenon has come to be called, can appear from almost anyone, and will usually take the form when a woman undergoes a tragic event, while remaining pure of heart. There have been a number of sightings of the White Lady ghosts across the Philippines. However, there's one story that stands out the most, as it has become the most commonly told story surrounding the legends of the ghost and its behaviors in the country. According to urban legend, the spirit of the lady in white belonged to a long-haired woman who was wearing a white dress on her way to her wedding. Suddenly, as she was driving, her car began shaking, and she crashed at high speed, causing her to perish instantly. This has caused her spirit to be trapped in this area in a constant state of attempting to get to her wedding in time. This has left many taxi drivers scared of driving through this region at night. In fact, it's been told amongst the drivers that they're not to pick up anyone alongside certain regions at night, as it's usually the lady in white who will enter the back seat of the taxi and take on a more disgusting form. A form that's left many taxi drivers running from their car and abandoning their taxis entirely. Union Cemetery is another place where this mysterious entity has been seen. The graveyard has become infamous for sightings of a White Lady spirit, which go back to at least the 1940s. The female ghost is said to have flowing black hair and be dressed in a long white gown or wedding dress. She walks the site of the cemetery at night, sometimes appearing on nearby roads. Ed Warren claimed to have captured definitive evidence of the White Lady ghost. Chillingly, Several drivers have reported seeing the apparitions suddenly appear in the middle of the road, only to vanish on impact with their vehicle. The identity of the mysterious white lady figure is not known. The Warrens believe that she was a young woman who passed away at childbirth. However, theories abound as to who she was in her time on Earth. One tale holds that she was a woman who passed away after slaying her husband. Another theory is that she was a young woman who lost her life at the turn of the 20th century, whose body was later disposed of in a nearby sinkhole. Another mysterious photograph is this one that someone sent me a few years back. The person said that their nun captured a strange craft in the sky and said that after reviewing the photographs it looked like a black triangle. This one is of particular interest because rarely do you see a black triangle in the daytime. Usually these crafts are seen during the night, standing up because of the 3 lights they give off. Black triangle UFOs are a type of craft that have been seen in our sky for years now, and although we have various videos and photographs of them, there's still many unanswered questions. The man who sent the photograph was Aaron, and he said the following: "My nan sent me these photographs while I was away. She lives in Portsmouth, which is located in the south of England. She told me the photos were taken a few seconds apart, but she couldn't understand what she had captured. After reviewing the photos, I couldn't work out what the old jet was. I asked her if she saw or heard anything, and she said no. After doing some research, I found out that triangular crafts were a common occurrence in the south of England. This is the only thing I could think it was, as I've never seen any military crafts that look like this." End quote. The message ended with him saying that he doesn't want any attention, but just wants to know what is non-captured. It's still one of the best and clearest images we have of one of these elusive black triangles. Though triangle UFO sightings are common, those who witness the crafts often report them as having similar features. Triangular UFOs are often said to be completely silent, making no noise whatsoever as they hover above, leaving behind no signs of contrails. The crafts are also usually reported as being around the size of a football field and dark in color. UFOs are largely referred to and depicted as flying saucers, but given the wide variety of reports over the years, triangular-shaped crafts seem to be one of the more common shapes that are witnessed. David Marlowe, UFO researcher and author of Triangular UFOs, claims to have researched over 17,000 UFO sightings that involve triangular-shaped graphs, often referred to as black triangles. While these types of UFOs are often associated with otherworldly visitors, there are some that speculate their earthly origins. Secret government projects have been going on for years, and while we don't know the extent or scale of these projects, it's entirely possible that these are human in origin, and are used as surveillance technology or as an experimental aircraft. Another strange photograph that got people talking was one that was captured on the surface of Mars. The photograph was taken by a camera on the Curiosity rover, where scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California began to investigate the mysterious light. According to NASA, the bright light appears in only one of the images, and not any of the others. Justin Mackey, a NASA imaging scientist, said the following about the image. "One possibility is that the light is the glint from a rock surface reflecting the sun. When these images were taken each day, the sun was in the same direction as the bright spot, west-northwest from the rover, and relatively low in the sky. We think it's either a vent hole or a glinty rock." End quote. Not everyone brought this idea, though, saying that this is just a theory and as of right now it hasn't been confirmed. As some have said, the image could be proof of alien life on the planet and even that of an unidentified flying object. Scientists, though, counted these arguments and said it's probably not the best idea to suggest it's alien life, going on to say that another idea is that it could be a subatomic particle that smashed into the camera, leaving behind its trail of energy. Although various theories have been put forward to try and explain what the mysterious light is, as of right now, it remains a mystery. So what do you make of these 3 mysterious photographs? A picture can tell 1,000 words, and what a better way to tell historical stories through photographs. Some old photographs, though, tell a different story. In some cases, they feature things that weren't seen until years later. When we think of haunted vehicles, we think of ghostly apparitions appearing at wind before vanishing into thin air. But what about a possessed car that existed in physical form? It almost sounds like it's from a Stephen King novel, which it is, but it's also based on a true story. Stephen King's work, Christine, revolved around a vintage car possessed by an evil spirit, resulting in a number of demonic car kills. It seems that it doesn't deviate so much from the real encounter. The car was a 1964 Dodge 330, a four-door sedan that began life as a police car in Old Orchard Beach, Maine. Every officer that drove that car passed away, and not whilst driving. Each of those 3 officers would end up taking their own lives along with their families. It then made it into the hands of Wendy Allen, a woman whose nickname the Sea Witch of Old Orchard Beach perhaps made the evil car a suitable purchase for her. The car, whilst in her possession, paused its spree, but supposedly not for the want of trying. Whilst hurtling down the highway, the Golden Eagle would randomly open its doors and lock the steering wheel, constantly looking to put Wendy Allen and her family at danger. However, perhaps with her knowledge of the dark arts, Wendy was able to suitably restrain the vehicle from carrying out any fatal consequences, but that didn't mean that others were safe. Stories of the evil machine circulated the community, and members of the local church clearly didn't take kindly to this. They ended up vandalizing the car. Those who did would pay with their lives. One was hit with lightning, and another person lost their head. Even just being close to the car could be enough to make you meet your end. 2 young adults would pass away after being close to the Golden Eagle, and unfortunately paramedics could not reach them. Even a kid who touched the car became possessed, with the same behavior as the original cops of the Golden Eagle, taking out his family and burning the house. It's reported that 14 people were taken out due to this car and its possession. However, a church group stole the car, chopped it up and spread its pieces across Ferris, Maine junkyards. However, this might not be the end of the story, since Wendy Allen has been committed to tracking the chunks of her beloved demon car and putting it back together. So who knows, perhaps the death count will increase once again. Another mysterious report that's backed up with photographic evidence is that of the bathroom spirit. Reports state the photograph was taken during 2015. It's what's in the background, though, that has people talking. The image was taken in a school in the Philippines, and after viewing the image, school pupils and teachers were horrified to see the mysterious figure in the background. The humanoid has long dark hair, white skin, and is said to be tall. Rather worrying. These students then came forward and said this isn't the first time they've seen this figure, going on to note that when being the last ones in school, they've seen this woman walking the hallways, almost as if she's searching for something. While some have tried to debunk the image and say that the students were just messing around, the pupils in the photograph have said the image is genuine. There's a story that one of the students passed away in the school over 40 years ago, and that to this day she can still be seen walking the hallways. Interestingly, after this image was taken and shared online, those who studied at the school said there was a spike in supernatural occurrences, some of which to this day remain a mystery. Missing Prime Minister. On the 17th of December 1967, Prime Minister of Australia Harold Holt disappeared into the waters near Portsea, Victoria. Widely believed to be merely a swimming accident, various theories began to pile up. This is most likely because Holt's body was never recovered from the waters. Holt became Prime Minister in January 1966. Holt initially denied having security, deeming it unnecessary and making him seem impersonal to the public. After a window of his office was sniped out and a later assassination attempt was made on the leader of the opposition, he finally agreed to one bodyguard but never took one on any vacations. Speaking of vacations, Holt was an avid outdoorsman. He had a fondness for spearfishing and would fish all year round. He also snorkels, preferring the freedom versus the weight of a tank. He is described as having incredible powers of endurance underwater. That being the case, however, Holt still had 2 nimbuses in the water, one which he blamed on a leaking snorkel, and one he blamed on chasing a fish while spearfishing. The morning of his disappearance began normally. Holt awoke early in his vacation house in Portsea, called his wife, and stopped at a general store. The items he purchased did not seem out of character. Insect repellents, peanuts, and some newspapers. Holt spent the morning with friends, with a notable stop in the Port Phillip Bay to catch a glimpse of a solo circumnavigator coming through. On the way home, in typical Holt fashion, he suggested they stop for a swim at the local beach. His reasonings were the hot day and wanting to work up an appetite for the barbecue lunch they planned. Holt was familiar with the area, having spent lots of time swimming and fishing in the region. He'd even once retrieved a porthole from a shipwreck in the area. Holt was the only one to venture deep in the water. Others deemed it unsafe due to a visible swell. Holt swam deep out into the ocean, despite the calls from his friends, and without a wave or call for help, Holt simply slipped beneath the water. The search for Holt's body went on until January 5, 1968. A formal investigation deemed it an accidental drowning, stating Holt took a risk that day and paid the price for it. They found no evidence to prove otherwise. They went further to explain that if sea creatures had gotten a hold of his body, he would have been reduced to bones within days. This would explain the lack of a body being found. It all sounds so cut and dry, but soon enough theories began to surface. Some theories claim he ended his life, fearing his political career was ending. The police report specifically ruled out this theory, as Holt carried on with his ordinary routines. His wife went on to say that she believed him too selfish to do this. Other ideas involve a Chinese submarine rescuing their lifelong spy, and being taken up by a nerve agent. His passing has even inspired a storyline on an Australian soap opera. Whatever locals believe, it's obvious Holt's disappearance has impacted the lives of those he served. So what do you make of these historical photographs? Mysterious walking stool of Sri Lanka. Going back a few years ago, there were images and stories going around that objects in Sri Lanka were moving on their own. One of these was a stool. The story goes that after rituals are performed, the stool was able to move on its own. These magical rituals are usually performed by a witch doctor, which use a variety of natural materials to summon some kind of paranormal entity. Over the years, many stories have come from this region. Another location shrouded in mystery is that of the stoneways to Sri Lanka. Many Indians grow up hearing the story of the Ramayana, which is an ancient Hindu poem that spoke of a magical bridge being constructed from large floating stones that stretched from the southern parts of India all the way to the northern part of Sri Lanka that was placed by the Hindu god Rama. What is absolutely mysterious about this claim is that no evidence of stones had been found until new state-of-the-art NASA satellites looked towards the region of northern Sri Lanka to notice large stones resting on the sandbar underwater that stretched 30 miles from Sri Lanka to the southern part of India, connecting the massive land masses. Researchers immediately began carbon dating the stones in an effort to better understand the time frame of the formation stones and whether or not they had formed naturally. This theory was almost immediately proven to be false, as evidence of carbon dating showed that given the fact that the large stones on top of the sandbar were of an older material than the sand beneath it, leading research scientists to believe that the rocks were carved from different areas and moved to that location by ancient people. The ability for the ancestors of the region to have constructed a massive 30-mile megalithic structure of stones weighing thousands of tons appears to lead many to believe that the ancients had advanced technologies that we could not fathom today. Even more interestingly are all the ancient Hindu accounts of the bridge and the gods forming these magical pathways via flying machines they would ride. 486958 Arakoth. On the 12th of November 2019, researchers officially named the distant object 2014 MU69 as Arakoth. The new name means sky in Powhatan, a language spoken by the Powhatan people of Tidewater, Virginia. Arakoth is the most distant object ever explored by a spacecraft. It was discovered on the 26th of June 2014 by the Hubble Space Telescope. Then, on the 1st of January 2019, the New Horizons space probe performed a successful flyby close to this distant object. Previously, Arakoth was nicknamed Ultima Thule. The object is floating amongst the different asteroids, comets, and icy rocks in the Kuiper Belt, which is the region of the solar system beyond the 8 major planets. The inner edge of the Kuiper Belt is estimated to be about 30 astronomical units from the Sunday, and its outer edge is estimated to be at a distance of 50 astronomical units from the Sun. 1 astronomical unit is equal to the distance between the Earth and the Sun, which is approximately 150 million kilometers. Arakoth is classified as a cold classical Kuiper Belt object. During the flyby, the New Horizons space probe flew past Arikoth at a distance of only 2,000 miles. Earlier, the space probe performed a flyby over Pluto as well. However, its distance from Pluto was around 5,800 miles. Therefore, the space probe was able to provide more detailed photographs of Arikoth as compared to Pluto. NASA released the photographs of Arikoth after the successful flyby in January 2019. The photos revealed the distant object having a snowman-like shape. It is composed of two lobes that have roughly spherical shapes. These lobes are tightly joined at the neck, and according to the surface at this part shines much more brightly as compared to other parts of the object. Arikoth is about 21 miles in length. Hiro Inoda was a Japanese man who lived from March 19, 1922 to January 16, 2014. He fought in the Second World War as Imperial Japanese Army Intelligence. The Imperial Japanese Army functioned as the official ground armed forces of the Japanese Empire. It was headed by the Japanese Army General Staff Office and the Ministry of the Army, who were both subordinates of the Japanese Emperor. Hiro Inoda was not only notable for being a part of the Imperial Japanese Army, but rather for his courageous and brave act in August 1945, which was towards the end of the war. Subsequently, after the war ended, he spent another 29 years hiding in the Philippines. This was not an act of cowardice, but rather an act of commitment and patriotism to his call to duty. This he continued until he was relieved of his duty by an order of the then Emperor of Showa in 1974 alongside a presidential pardon. Up until he was relieved of duty from the Imperial Japanese Army Intelligence, he served as the second lieutenant, and just like his rank, he was also the second to last person to surrender, with the last being Taro Nakamura. Aside the professional occupation of being a military man, Hiro Onoda was also a cattle farmer, a profession inherited from the Kamikawa village, Laxo District, Wakayama, Japan, before he got enlisted to the Imperial Japanese Army Infantry at the age of 18. Onoda was an intelligence officer alongside some other officials who were instructed to do all within their might to obscure all attacks of the enemy. Not too long after, his co-intelligence officers had either surrendered or passed away. This facilitated his promotion to lieutenant, of which he then ordered his men to take to hiding. He documented in detail his life as a fighter in the war in an autobiography titled No Surrender, My 30-Year War. This autobiography was written shortly after his return from the war. Though not documented in his autobiography, accounts of locals have it that he took the life of persons in the town where he went into hiding. Upon his return, Inoda was quite displeased and bothered with the decline in the traditional values of Japan. In 1975, he finally left Japan for Brazil, following closely the example of his elder brother, Tyria Cattle. Subsequently, he got married in 1976 and assumed a leadership role in the Japanese community in Torinos, Brazil, which was known as the Jamak Colony. He also held various educational and enlightening camps for different young persons across Japan. On the 6th of December 2004, the Brazilian Air Force awarded him Meritorious Medal of Santos Dumont. Also, on the 21st of February 2010, the Legislative Assembly of Mato Grosso do Sul honored him with the title of Cidadão, which means a citizen. Sadly, on the 16th of January 2014, he passed away as a result of heart failure coming from pneumonia complications. The Lost Library of Ivan the Terrible, known as the Golden Library or the Lost Library of the Moscow Tsars, this particular collection of texts dates back to 16th century Russia. Believed to have been created by Ivan the Terrible, the once esteemed collection of priceless works is now little more than a mysterious treasure hunt. Many believe the library houses very rare Greek, Latin, and Egyptian works, as well as some 2nd century. The marriage of Ivan the Terrible to Princess Sophia Paleolog of the Byzantine is said to have brought the remnants of the libraries of Constantinople into the collection. The first recorded reference to the library was made in 1518 in a biography of Greek scholar Michael Tripolis, or Maximus the Greek. A meeting between Tripolis and Prince Vasili III is mentioned. Prince Vasili, son of Ivan the Great, knew Tripolis had already worked translating texts into Russian. Tripolis described countless multitudes of Greek books, noting that he had not even seen as many Greek books in Greece. It is widely believed that Ivan the Terrible kept this hoard of books beneath the Moscow Kremlin. The Kremlin is the fortified complex in Moscow's city center, housing 5 palaces, 4 cathedrals, and the Grand Kremlin Palace, which once housed the Tsars and now serves as the home of the President of the Russian Federation. During this time, fires commonly spread throughout the city. Perhaps it was the only safe place to house such works safely. The books did not rot beneath the Kremlin, however. While establishing a church in Russia in the late 16th century, German minister Johannes Wettermann was summoned to the Kremlin by Ivan the Terrible. Wettermann, among others, were tasked with translating some works. Although Wettermann declined the job, it goes to show that Ivan remained dedicated to the knowledge held within his library. In the early 19th century, Professor Christopher van Dabilov from Estonia believed he discovered a list of the texts of the Tsar's collection in archives located in Parnu. Although he claimed he could not find the document after his first visit, notes he had taken indicate the library consisted of 800 manuscripts, including those from a Byzantine emperor. This list also mentioned 142 volumes of the history of Rome, of which historians only knew of 35, a full version of the otherwise incomplete Cicero's De Republica, and an unknown Virgil poem. Some doubt the credibility, however, as von Dabilov did not share the list with anyone. In the 1890s, Professor Thramer of the University of Strasbourg spent time scouring Moscow city in hopes of finding the lost texts of Ivan the Terrible. He did locate a book of Homer's hymns that he believed originated in the Library of Constantinople, leaving him to believe it had made its way to Russia through Princess Sophia. Through all of his hunting, however, Thramer too concluded that the collection must be hidden beneath the Kremlin. Excavations beneath the Kremlin have turned up nothing but some weapons and empty hallways. There have been no discoveries of chests filled with books, as some have claimed. As with any good treasure hunt, the library is now ripe with myths. Some believe Ivan the Terrible was translating books of dark magic. Another such story claims the library has been cursed, causing blindness to whoever lays eyes on it. In the 1990s, the search for the library extended past the Kremlin into the surrounding areas under the influence of Ivan the Terrible, though no great discovery has yet been found. Destroyed by fire, cursed, or perhaps not even existing in the first place. What do you think happened to the library of Ivan the Terrible? The graves of slaves. For some unknown reason, the Egyptian government and the expert Egyptologists claim that there were never Semitic-speaking people or Hebrews of which that were enslaved in Egypt all throughout its history at any point in time. Quite obviously, these findings and claims directly contradict the stories of the Torah and the Christian Bible, of which many claim to be an effort made by the Egyptian government given their tensions with the Israeli government and against Christian organizations. Interestingly enough, the truth is that there is overwhelming evidence that Semitic-speaking people inhabited Egypt, including a direct reference to the Torah that specified a second pharaoh of whom was Hebrew and possibly the existence of Joseph in the time before Moses. In fact, by the late Middle Kingdom era, of which was roughly 3,700 years ago, the Semitic-speaking people had achieved the highest forms of power in Egypt in the form of the second pharaoh ruling the entire lower kingdom of Egypt, along with more than 27 scarabs found in Egypt, Canaan, and Nubia confirming these changes in power. It also appears that evidence of these Semitic-speaking people were found in the discovery of a pit of Hebrews dated around the end of this reign, of whom were believed to have possibly been thrown into a mass grave similar to that commonly seen in the treatment of slaves. The Egyptian record then goes on to specify that Semitic-speaking people were banished when a strange and mysterious group, known as the Hyksos, came into power. Showing that there is more than enough artifacts and evidence of the reign of a second pharaoh, the banishment of the Hebrew people, and pits of mass graves that held Hebrew slaves. Although Egyptologists have not only completely refused to speak on the matter and find the evidence to be nothing more than an out-of-context belief that doesn't fit with their own, it is obvious that they have no way to explain the authenticity of these accounts and the biblical one. The Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine, the Superstition Mountains. The name just makes you want to go and explore it even before you know what's said to be hidden in the hills. Located east of Phoenix, Arizona, there are tales of a gold mine, the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. People have been scouring the mountains looking for this treasure since at least 1892. At one point, it is said that over 8,000 people were looking for the mine annually. So who was the lost Dutchman? Well, as most stories, time and tale have twisted the history into a woven mix of fact and fiction. In fact, in 1977, there had been 62 versions of the story already in circulation. Most of them go something like this. German immigrant Jacob Voles settled in Arizona during the gold rush. Around that same time, there was a wealthy Mexican family in the same area known as the Peraltas. The Peraltas were cattle ranchers who had also discovered gold along the Superstition Mountains. While returning gold to Mexico, the Peraltas were ambushed and most of them were killed by Apaches. Some stories say the Apaches took the gold back and hid it later to be discovered by Volz. Others say Volz lent a helping hand to one of the remaining Peraltas, who rewarded him by telling him where to find the gold. Either way you slice it, the gold was real. Bars of gold were found beneath Volz's bed. In 1949, Peralta stones were found in the mountains, lending credibility to the tales. While hiking in the Superstitions, a hiker tripped over an exposed corner of the stone. This led him to dig up 4 different smooth carved stones. There were many markings. One stone read, "I pasture north of the river." Others depicted figures such as a priest with a cross. Mentions of dangerous canyon walks and 18 marked places to get to the heart are one others. On 2 of the stones, maps are leading to a heart. The temperature at night drops rapidly, often causing hikers to have hypothermia. Others believe there isn't a mine to be found at all. Instead, a great cache of stolen goods and gold hid away by vaults themselves. Whether it is a hidden cache or a pure gold vein, it has kept people searching. Although a law was passed in 1984, prohibiting the mining and digging in the area, treasure hunters still flock to the area, hoping for a bit of that gold rush excitement. Grib Shunden during the 1970s, a local diving club discovered the wreck of an unusual ancient Danish ship in the Baltic Sea just north of the island of Stora Ekon. The wreck was found lying at a depth of 10 meters. The divers were not aware that what they had discovered was actually a highly significant archaeological find. Therefore, they did not tell the archaeologists about the discovery until the year 2000. They investigated the wreck and in 2013, by using advanced techniques like dendrochronological sampling, they identified the ship as Gribsund. The archaeologists found that the ship was made from the oak trees that fell during the winters of 1482 and 1483. Gribsund, which is also known as Gribsund, Griff, and sometimes Griffin, was a Danish warship used by John the King of Denmark from 1481 to 1513. It is believed that the ship sank in 1485 as a result of a fire. This ship has a very unique design, especially made for psychological warfare. The ship features a beak of an eagle, giant teeth, and a screaming man that sticks out of the mouth. Archaeologists have also found the traces of paint used to color the figurehead. Researchers are now trying to figure out the exact color with which the figurehead of the ship was painted. Grib Shundan is considered to be one of the best preserved shipwrecks from the medieval period. Several parts of the wreckage, including the figurehead, have been brought to Copenhagen for further research. It is currently in the custodianship of the Danish National Museum. Sightings of the Zimbabwe merfolk. Unlike the cute animated portrayals of the mythical creature, the mermaids of Zimbabwe have been a recurring problem for those living nearby large waterways in the country, as the humanoid creatures have reportedly been at the center of a variety of random attacks, terrifying vandalism and delays in construction efforts. Back in 2012, while working on the Gokwe and Osborne dams, the Zimbabwe construction company claimed that nearly every employee had left the construction site in fear for their lives after having been attacked by a strange humanoid river monster known as the Mambu Muntu. It was believed that the Mambu Muntu used the rivers as natural outlets to the ocean and that they had become terribly angered by the construction efforts. Debates were made on whether or not construction should continue before a full report on the environmental impact was made. construction continued regardless. This forced the local council to hire entirely new workers from out of the country to work on the dam, as the locals refused to continue working on the construction of the project due to their superstitions. Oddly enough, after several weeks, even the foreign workers resigned after claiming to have been attacked by humanoid sea creatures and regarded the entire river as being cursed. In an effort to appease these strange creatures, the council was forced to perform cleansing rituals and make offerings to the creatures before construction began again with no further issues. Although most do not make the connection, Zambia, the closest country to Zimbabwe, built the Kariba Dam in the same waterways within their borders. The project was determined to be a necessity in the region, as the water from the river would not only be able to power all of the electrical requirements for that region, but it would also prove to be a major work program that would allow a number of locals to generate income while working on the projects to be used to help spur the local economy of the region. Unfortunately, many of the religious figures already suffering under the oppressive hand of the government felt that the construction of the dam was a violation of the principles of their god known as Nyamanyami. Nyamanyami was, more specifically, the god of the river Zambezi and was believed to reside within the river. Religious figures argued that if the dam was built, then Nyamanyami would curse them for messing with the natural ecosystem and bring on a terrible tragedy, urging the locals to defy the government and refuse construction. Despite this sentiment from the religious leaders, many of the locals would still go on to work on the construction of the dam, assisting in the government's tactic to force the native Batanga people to move from their homes and live elsewhere. Almost as if directly predicted by the religious leaders, shortly after the Padang people were moved, a devastating flood tore through the region, and due to the half-construction of the dam blocking the only direction for water to flow, it led to the entire dam becoming destroyed, killing every single worker that was working on the construction of the project. Oddly enough, however, not a single body has been recovered. Given the fact that the majority of those who died were locals, this led to many of the relatives begging the religious leaders to help lift the curse and allow the dam to be constructed without any future problems. Religious leaders then gave instructions to the people for the only way that the curse would be lifted. They must sacrifice a calf and offer it to the river. For some inexplicable reason, after the ceremony was completed, the bodies of the workers appeared where the calf was placed in the river, allowing the souls to finally be put to rest. Agnes Sampson. In the spring of 1590, King James VI of Scotland had just returned from Copenhagen with his bride, and of Denmark. Denmark at the time was obsessed by the topic of witchcraft, and during his visit, James had been witness to multiple witch hunts and 2 executions of accused witches at Kronborg. James was so taken by the rumors of this sorcery that he immediately attributed the rough seas on his return voyage from Denmark to Scotland as the work of Scottish witches, who had raised storms to endanger him and his wife's life. As soon as he set foot on Scottish lands, he decided to set up trials and inquisitions to outsource Scottish witches. Scotland was swept up in a mass hysteria which saw hundreds of women accused. Agnes Sampson was one of the unfortunate Scottish women accused of witchcraft. A successful midwife and considered to have healing powers, it was hardly surprising she would be accused. In Scotland, there was a deep-running skepticism of abortionists and healers by the largely dominated male medical profession. Sampson was accused of gathering with the devil and other witches on Halloween night of 1590 to conjure storms to attempt to sink the king's ship. Though Sampson vehemently denied any association with witchcraft, she was tortured and brought before King James himself. Sampson's torture included being stripped naked and shaved to try and spot a devil's mark, being thrown in a prison cell and constantly kept awake, and being forced to wear a witch's bridle, a painful and humiliating apparatus that involved an iron muzzle put around your head with several spikes going into your face. Remarkably, no one was able to extract a confession from Sampson. Her guards became increasingly frustrated and decided to increase Sampson's torture. They placed a tourniquet rope around her neck and began to strangle her. It was only then that Sampson confessed to having contact with the devil, who she said appeared to her as a black man, a dog and a herrick, and using witchcraft to attempt to kill King James and his bride. Following her confession, Sampson was taken to a scaffold on Castle Hill where she was burnt at the stake. It is said that to this day, Samson's ghost roams Holyrood Palace. She appears naked and shaved and moves in a slow and agonizing way, the repercussions of the torture she was forced to endure. Penrith Hoard. In 1785, a small boy found a few silver breeches at the New Bigging Moor near Penrith in England. Later, in 1830, a few other smaller thistle breeches were found in the same area. 150 years later, in 1989, a detailed archaeological investigation at the same spot resulted in discovery of a number of other silver items. Archaeologists concluded that all these items were a part of a dispersed hoard. Usually such hoards are dispersed as a result of routine farming work. For example, some items of a single hoard can be moved to a different location as a result of plowing. The Penrith hoard includes 5 Viking brooches, jewelry, coins, ingots, and hack silver. The large thistle brooch discovered in 1785 was passed to the Laverian Museum, which was a private museum in London. It was eventually brought to the British Museum. A few items of the hoard that were discovered in 1785 and 1830 were lost. However, most of the items of this dispersed hoard have been recovered and are kept at the British Museum in London. Some historians believe that the hoard could be connected to the events of 927 AD, when the kings of Scotland and Strathclyde came to Penrith to honor a fell Stan. Gothrith, the king of Dublin, was also in the area along with his army. It's believed that a number of skirmishes happened between Aethelstan and Gothrith, resulting in Aethelstan's eventual victory. Historians believe that the Penrith hoard may have been deposited at some point during these skirmishes. Although at one point of time, a nuclear power plant in Ukraine's city of Chernobyl presented no obvious outward harm, anything nuclear-related always harnesses potential risk. Unfortunately, that risk would turn into a full-blown reality on April 26, 1986. They say time is healing, and although in some instances that rings to be true, with the incident of Chernobyl, even with time, unfortunately the city and neighboring regions still suffer the impact. That took place that day. So what happened at Chernobyl? The Soviet Union erected 4 nuclear reactors in 1977. The fourth is primarily the one held in question and essentially responsible for engraving a deep irreversible mark in history and ultimately led to the downfall of said Soviet Union, and not to mention dramatically impacted lives including humans, wildlife, and nature. Disastrous accident occurred as a result of a test gone wrong. Workers were testing the cooling and electrical mechanisms on the 4th nuclear reactor, or Chernobyl Reactor 4 as it was formally called. The objective was to see if in the event of a power shutdown if the reactor could still be successfully called. Plans went entirely awry as there was an unexpected and unanticipated power surge. Workers desperately tried to stifle the power surge in efforts to deactivate and shut it down, but it was too late. Another power surge within the reactor already had its gears in motion, consecutively causing explosions within, brittling the reactor's makeup all the way to its nuclear center, which served to be the most detrimental of all. Once the nuclear core was exposed, radioactive material freely escaped, wreaking havoc into the atmosphere. It was chaos. The damage was done and ongoing. There was no stopping it at that point. Although the physical fires that were a product of the explosions were put out, there was not much that could be done for the escaped radioactive material. Even though efforts were carried out to contain as best as it could possibly be under difficult circumstances. At first, the Soviet Union attempted to keep the events at Chernobyl on the down low. However, news quickly leaked, and the damages were speaking for themselves. It was not something that could be shrouded in secrecy, but the efforts to do so contributed to the Soviet Union's ultimate downfall. Some thought it was hostilities to blame for the Chernobyl disaster in the sense that it left the Soviet Union isolated, which may have impacted proper safety protocols and regulations being made and upheld. Others blame the actual makeup of the reactors and power plant, deeming them as faulty. And others blame the workers, saying that they went against safety protocols. Whatever it was, it does not change the fact that the aftermath was and remains a disaster in the works of being cleaned up even 30+ years after the fact. So today, Here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a brief look at what life was like before and after that catastrophic day. Man finds old photographs taken in Chernobyl. Chernobyl was not always attributed to chaos. Rather, a roll of film was discovered decades after the accident that tells otherwise. Although it was a nuclear power plant, that does not change the fact that it was a workplace and was treated as such. The roll of film, which was a compilation of photos captured on a Villia camera prototype, was traced back to having been captured by Alexander Chabovsky between 1979 and 1980. At that point in time, the power plant was in the process of being breathed to life, as it was still in the works of construction. Chabovsky happened to be one of the workers hired by a third-party company to aid in the construction of the plant. However, the days of construction were steadily coming to an end, and Chabovsky thought, what better way of commemorating the completion of the project than a photo? He went about capturing photographs of his and even himself. The photos depicted different tasks designated for the construction, including welding, metal cutting, crane operations, and rigging, to name a few. The photographs definitely shed light on some questionable practices, as the photos show some dangerous and risky practices being carried out that safety protocols of today would sternly admonish. The photos even captured more laid-back moments, like co-workers gathering around for lunch. Although the photos may not sound the most interesting in comparison to other facets of photography, the discovery of the film was seen as a shining breakthrough, as it shed light into the past of what, unbeknownst to everyone at the time, would later become the scene of what the world would come to know as the scene of the most detrimental and disastrous nuclear accident in history. Alexander Chabovsky's construction days on the Chernobyl plant inevitably came to an end. He set out to process the film, but procrastinated in the actual printing of the images for a later time. However, naturally, as life takes its course, Chabovsky never quite got around to printing said images, as he got busier with other unrelated assignments. So the film was left unprinted and stored away in his home in Pripyat, Ukraine, which happened to be near in proximity to Chernobyl. In February of 1986, Chabovsky found himself being whisked off to another assignment in a different city, Yakutia. It was there, when he was on assignment there, that he later heard of news of what had tragically transpired at Chernobyl. It was not until about a year after the catastrophic events that Chabovsky was able to get back into his home in Pripyat to salvage his belongings. However, as it turned out, there was not much to salvage, as the place had been evidently robbed. However, lucky for the film, it had been left safe and untouched, as whoever robbed the place probably saw no intrinsic value in it. Chabovsky took the film to his new home, where he forgot about it. It was not until decades later until the photographs were printed and cast light into what Chernobyl was like before the catastrophe. Tragic effects Chernobyl had on human lives. Naturally, as one would expect, radiation, when not handled with the necessary precautions, can have both unpredictable and equally dangerous consequences. The tragic accident at Chernobyl was no exception in that regard. Proved to be both lethal and carcinogenic. Many of the immediate workers on the scene suffered severe radiation sickness, which ultimately led to death in about 31 accounted cases. 2 workers had unfortunately died immediately on impact due to the explosions that took place on site. The remaining 21 deaths were a result of the radiation exposure and consisted of both the plant workers as well as firefighters, who had been recruited to come and aid in extinguishing the fires that had escalated at the plant. The toll on human life was not exclusive to the workers directly on site, however. To put it into perspective, the Chernobyl catastrophe is said to have contributed to a toxic exposure of 100 times more radiation into the atmosphere than what was launched on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan during the 1940s. It is no secret that the effects in Japan that transpired as a result were reprehensible, and those regions in Japan are still recovering today. That just goes to give a small glimpse of what one could expect from a radiation exposure that was accounted to be 100 times more in its amount of radiation, such as that in Chernobyl. Even though the physical event that transpired at all has long ago concluded, the effects of it live on, which make it exponentially difficult to stash away the catastrophe as a thing of the past. The radiation that escaped has left Chernobyl and several neighboring regions, including neighboring countries Belarus and Western Russia, still contaminated as lasting impacts. of the nuclear accident. The events that spiral at Chernobyl have been correlated to over 6,000 cases of thyroid cancer in both adults and children. Children who were 5 or younger when the accident happened are said to have been, and are still more susceptible to medical complications that impact their dental health, immunity, growth, and place them at 10 times the risk of developing cancer. Not only that, but it has also been linked to a rise in birth defects. Statistics conducted as recently as 2015 have shown that Ukraine tallies nearly 6,000 babies born yearly with genetic heart defects which are correlated to the leftover radiation. Overall, there has been a hefty percentage increase of 250% for birth defects in areas deemed as fallout regions from the radiation surrounding Chernobyl. The United Nations International Children Emergency Fund, or otherwise known in its abbreviated form UNICEF, has narrated that in a statistical breakdown of health effects in children, there has been increases of 38% in cancerous tumors, 43% in blood disorders, and 63% in muscular, connective tissue and bone illnesses and disorders. A bold 85% of children in Belarus, a neighboring country to Ukraine, are said to experience some level of impact from the accident in the sense that even if the effects are not outwardly obvious, they carry genetic markers that make them susceptible to health decline as well as their future generations. Those numbers are undoubtedly a lot to take in, and it is extremely disheartening that this is where the situation still relatively remains today. What happened at Chernobyl has not only affected humans, but it has also affected the wildlife, including animals and the land. About 20% of Belarus farmland is still unusable. Animals have been spotted to experience a rise of mutations. Groundwater is unsafe to drink. It is also put into question whether the crops grown in the soil in fallout regions are safe to consume, as it is predicted that the produce is affected by the remnants of the radiation in the soil from the incident, thus making them unsafe to consume and potentially may even be carcinogenic culprits. When will it be safe to live in Chernobyl again? As far as when things will be back to normal in Chernobyl, that is still a question that is relatively still up in the air. It is estimated that the area and neighboring regions will still be in cleanup efforts for many decades to come. Scientists have even gone to the extent of predicting that the region and neighboring regions deemed as exclusion zones will not be safe to inhabit for a bold and hefty 20,000 years. However, with that said, it is not to say that people are not currently inhabiting those regions. In fact, some have returned to their old family homes to nostalgically resume the farm life they once lived as children and adolescents before the catastrophe at Chernobyl. That primarily applies to the elderly. However, families who are fleeing crises or conflicting situations have also been attracted to the area due to the highly affordable land. Some homes and land can be purchased at what amounts to be a meager price of a few hundred American dollars. The price tag can be exceptionally tempting, especially for those escaping some sort of conflict. However, considering the nature of the area that is still contaminated from Chernobyl, it holds the potential of a not-so-pretty price for your health. As far as living conditions go, there is access to electricity, gas, and phone lines. For water and sewage, the area lacks any running and functional systems intact. As mentioned before, the groundwater has been designated as unsafe to drink as it is still heavily contaminated. However, there are wells present, but there still exists a risk factor. All water must be boiled first, especially in the case of drinking water to aid in minimizing potential risks. As far as maintaining a livelihood with work, there are no working opportunities considering the nature of the area and how they are still considered exclusion zones. Although it is possible to grow crops and raise animals and the like, as mentioned prior, it is not without risk as the soil is still contaminated, so it puts the produce that is hence produced from the crops in question as to whether they are truly safe to consume. Although several diligent efforts have been made and are still in the making to reinstate a sense of order, the area and neighboring regions unfortunately have several years more, maybe even thousands, before normalcy will truly be achieved due to the gravity of the impacts from the events that transpired on that fateful day. Although the current circumstances still remain grim, as with anything in life, it does well to view through lenses of hope for a better and brighter future ahead for lessons learned. But what do you make of the story of Chernobyl? Credited as being one of the first modern-day sightings of unidentified flying objects, the story of Kenneth Arnold appears to be one of the most well-known and highly debated encounters of the 1940s, featuring possible extraterrestrial intervention and government cover-up conspiracies. According to the report, Kenneth Arnold claimed that on the 24th of June, he had been flying in a private charter plane that he was piloting himself from Chehalis, Washington, on his way to Yakima, Washington for a business trip. As he was flying, he made a small detour over the region of Mount Rainier in the hopes of possibly spotting a downed U.S. Marine Corps C-46 transport plane that had reportedly crashed near the base of the mountain and was announced to have had a $5,000 U.S. reward to anyone who could supply the U.S. military with sufficient information to help locate the downed aircraft. Arnold gave up the search and rerouted his flight path eastward to head towards Yakima. It was around this time that he noticed what he described as a bright flashing light that was similar to a ray of sunlight reflecting off a mirror and hitting his face. Roughly 30 seconds following the flash of light, Arnold claimed to see a series of bright flashes that were hovering north of Mount Rainier, believed to have been about 20 to 25 miles to his left. Unsure of the type of craft that could have been responsible for the flashing lights, he quickly began rotating his craft, moving his plane side to side and removing his eyeglasses. This was to make sure that the bright flashing lights were not some form of sunlight reflection that was catching his eyewear at an awkward angle. Sufficiently convinced that the flashing lights were not sunlight reflections, Arnold began watching the strange lights move across at incredibly fast speeds, which he estimated to be about 1,200 miles per hour while maneuvering in flipping patterns similar to bird-like aerial flight. Believing that the craft could have been a new type of experimental jet, he paid special attention to the shape of the craft in an attempt to learn what type of model the experimental military craft could have been based off of, but found that they appeared to have been saucer-shaped with one large craft at the center that was described as crescent-shaped. Although the event was dismissed by Air Force intelligence officers as being nothing more than a mirage, Kenneth Arnold would eventually be validated through the assistance of corroborating witness testimony from a man by the name of Fred Johnson. According to Fred Johnson, who worked as a prospector on Mount Adams, Johnson wrote to AAF Intelligence that he viewed 6 objects on the 24th of June around the same time that Kenneth Arnold encountered the 9 bright flashing lights, that he described were round and tapered to a point in the head that formed into an oval shape. As he viewed the craft passing over the area through a small telescope, he noted that the strange craft appeared to affect his compass in ways commonly seen when around the compass was placed a round magnetized rock, pointing evidence towards impossible to explain electromagnetic properties. When media outlets questioned Kenneth Arnold further, he had remarked that their flight patterns looked similar to saucers skipping on the surface of the water, a phrase that would later be used to coin the now famous term flying saucers for extraterrestrial craft. Today, the theories that Kenneth Arnold had seen an early iteration of the modern-day stealth bomber have been at the center of skeptics' debunking of the event. However, Kenneth Arnold clarifies that the shape of the craft were more akin to sightings of traditional UFO encounters and demonstrated strange flipping behaviors that could not be replicated with stealth bombing craft even in the modern day. Inspired by his sighting, Kenneth Arnold would go on to document and investigate future cases of UFO encounters, which would lead him to the strange government cover-up of the Maury Island incident. Located in the Bay of Washington State, Small Island has become the center of a number of that were originally reported to have occurred on the island during the late 1940s. According to reports gathered together by Kenneth Arnold on the 21st of June during 1947, Fred Chrisman and Harold Dahl witnessed what the 2 men described as 6 donut-shaped aircraft floating in the sky above their patrol boat. After an unknown period of time of watching the individual craft, the men claimed that one of the donut ships dropped what was described as white lava that landed on the patrol boat. After hitting a co-worker's arm, leaving him injured, as well as the onboard dog, the team returned to the shore to work out what had just happened and report the incident to higher channels. It was during this time that Kenneth Arnold, an airplane pilot and flight enthusiast, claimed to have encountered several unidentified flying objects in and around the same area that Fred Chrisman and Harold Dahl had witnessed their events. After Fred Chrisman and Harold Dahl reported the strange event, Dahl claimed that he had been visited by a man in a dark suit who warned him not to talk about the unidentified flying object incident with anyone, Otherwise, there would be serious repercussions for all of the parties involved with the encounter. This would eventually lead to general reluctance on the part of Harold Dahl when confronted on the incident and during a follow-up investigation by the FBI. Dahl would later claim that there was nothing more than a hoax in an effort to distance himself from the event. The FBI investigative report would later quote, "If questioned by the authorities, he was going to say it was a hoax because he did not want any further trouble over the matter." Fred Christman, however, continued with his claims that the entire story was completely legitimate. Oddly enough, after several news outlets had picked up their story, private sources had never been boat patrolmen anywhere near Maury Island where the incident had taken place. Despite the vehement claims from Christman and Dahl that they were being discredited as a part of some sort of cover-up scheme perpetrated by unknown forces, the general public began to believe that the entire incident was nothing more than an elaborate hoax done for an eventual book deal with a fantasy magazine. Kenneth Arnold, who retrieved the white medal from Fred Christman and Harold Dahl, continued to pursue the case on his own and contacted 2 retired Air Force intelligence officers to look over the medal and to prove definitively that it was evidence of an advanced piece of extraterrestrial alloy. Although their findings at the time were inconclusive, the 2 Air Force officers assured Arnold that they would soon get back to him at a later time. After boarding their North American B-25 Mitchell aircraft, however, the Air Force pilots suffered major equipment malfunction and passed away on their trip back to California. But what do you make of this mysterious story? Elon Musk recently shared a Mars photograph, and it didn't take long for people to notice something strange in the background. Various users pointed out that there appeared to be a black object hovering in the background of the image, with one person saying the following, "That's impressive and everything, but are we not going to talk about the UFO that can be seen hovering in the background?" End quote. With another person saying the following, "I can't be the only person that sees a UFO back there. What is it?" End quote. It's important to note that NASA and other space agencies have said these objects are nothing more than space debris or camera anomalies, but it hasn't stopped users from suggesting alternative theories. Those who saw the image immediately started to speculate what it was, with some saying that when you zoom in, you can easily see a large black hole. Others went on to comment that they've seen similar things in other NASA images. Others have said that now Mars has various rovers on the Martian surface. Perhaps they should go over and investigate these artifacts and put to rest any speculation. Some did say, though, that this image is a bit of a stretch, and that it's likely nothing. The Perseverance rover is currently NASA's larger and most advanced rover on Mars. But what's interesting is that some people have claimed it's already captured very strange artifacts. However, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration do not agree with these theories. Some amateur researchers have disagreed and say that photographs like this back up their theories that something strange is happening on Mars. This isn't the only photograph where people have claimed to have seen strange objects above the surface of Mars. This image was taken by the right navigation camera aboard the NASA's Curiosity rover, and it's one of the photographs that UFO believers use to back up their claims that something is happening on Mars. The photograph appears to show a large triangle or disk, and it can be seen hovering above one of the nearby mountains. The photograph was sent to me a few years back by someone who said they often look through the Mars apps and old images, saying that this is one of the most interesting images that they found. Those who spent countless hours looking through old NASA images have said there's many different types of objects that can be seen hovering in the sky, but note that NASA don't tend to give an answer for what they are and just brush them aside, saying that they're either debris or camera anomalies. Those who have gone on to look at other celestial bodies have said it's not just Earth and Mars where these strange objects show up. One celestial body that we're all familiar with is that of our moon. However, ever since man landed here, many strange theories have been put forward by various people, questioning man's intention on the moon, and that if there's other things here going on that we're being kept in the dark about. One structure said to be present on the moon is that of a pyramid. In fact, amateur researchers have said the moon's surface is full of them, and that this could prove that it's not only humans that's interested in the moon. Theories started to run wild after NASA shared an interesting photograph taken during Apollo 17. Interestingly, the space agency listed this photograph as blank, and when first looking at it, it does appear to be the case. However, when people increase the brightness and contrast, it appears that this photograph is not blank and features a rather large-looking structure, which many have compared to a pyramid. One thing that is certain is that these images are genuine. They were uploaded by NASA and can still be seen today. Although some have put forward the idea that the images could just be lunar equipment, others are not so sure. Due to this, it's only caused researchers to become more interested in these anomalies, causing some to spend countless hours searching through old images, in the hopes of finding something similar. Those who have dedicated their time to this have found something interesting, and this is that these pyramid-like structures seem to actually be quite common on the lunar surface. Interestingly, the most recent pyramid to have been discovered on the moon was back in 2019. Photographs soon started to make their rounds on social media, with various theories being put forward in order to explain what people were seeing. It seems that there's two types of people when it comes to these anomalies. There are those that think these structures should be taken seriously, and that scientists and researchers should investigate them further, while others have said the most likely explanation for what people are seeing is lunar mounds and even pareidolia. It's also been suggested that the angle of the images is hard to study, with some saying these pyramid-like structures could be tiny. However, this has been countered by some as they've said you can compare them to their surroundings, and some of them are in fact massive. Believers in these images have also said it's clear what these structures are, and that pareidolia can't be used in this argument as some of the images are clear. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration have denied that there's any pyramids on the moon and have explained that these structures are part of the lunar surface, or that of pareidolia. Whenever a new batch of space photographs are sent back, it's likely that more mysterious photographs will emerge, showcasing what some describe are unidentified flying objects. There's some that believe that Mars was once the planet that hosted life. However, as of right now, NASA and other space agencies have said this isn't true, and that they've never found evidence to back up these claims. So what do you make of these interesting images? Do you think they show something strange? Or can they be explained as things like camera anomalies and space debris? Bringing animals back to life will always be a controversial topic. Those in favor will say it gives us a chance to study them and understand what life would have been like thousands of years ago, while others say we should just let them rest and that there's a reason they were wiped out in the first place. Russian scientists went with the first option, and a few years back it was announced that these worms had not only returned back to life, but started to feed and multiply rapidly. The news then got shared recently on various websites, and due to everything that's happened, it got people worried. The event was described by scientists as being truly revolutionary, and saying that they thought this would never happen. The team are now working on trying to understand how these worms were able to do what they did. One of the first websites to feature the news that the Russian scientists had thought roundworms was back in 2018. And although people have voiced their concerns, the scientists have said it's one of the greatest discoveries they've made. These roundworms have been under scientific supervision the whole time, with the team saying that the discovery is nothing short of a revolution in the field of cryobiosis. Cryobiosis happens when water around the creature becomes frozen, and in turn causes that animal to become frozen. Once temperatures return to normal, the creature will continue to live on. What's interesting about this discovery is that scientists weren't even looking for roundworms at the time they were found. Things like bacteria and single-celled organisms have been known to survive much longer in similar conditions. But the team have said what's so special about this is that these roundworms are multicellular organisms, and no one thought these worms could have been resurrected after such a long time. One of the team members, Sachilovich, said the following: "We hadn't obtained multicellular animals that had survived cryobiosis on a geological timescale before. It was just a happy coincidence that we got 2 live nematodes in 2 soil samples at once." But even their existing record for survival in suspended animation was only around 30 to 40 years. End quote. Even when the soil samples were sent off, the worms weren't initially seen. The scientists at the lab placed them on a petri dish and started to observe them for the next 72 hours. One of the researchers said the following: "We spotted the worms only when they started moving. That was around 10 to 14 days after unfreezing. They probably came to life even earlier." End quote. Non-believers soon started to put forward other theories like these were modern-day worms, and not ancient worms as described. But these rumors were soon put to rest as these samples were taken from specific regions, and these were near rivers that were able to be dated back 42,000 years. Also, they were collected from the ground using a drill, with the scientists noting that the drill had been sterilized before use. The team said that the first sample that was brought up ended up being over 32,000 years old, with the second being even older, saying that after tests were conducted this one was 42,000 years old. Both of these roundworms were identified as female. Statlovich said the following about the creatures: "A single-celled organism can survive due to its adaptive properties. For example, the ability to form various stages of dormancy, spores, or cysts. But a multicellular organism has a more complex structure. Although nematodes are also known to have a dormant stage, during prolonged hibernation, damage to DNA and cell membranes can occur and can accumulate in the cells. Toxins can be produced that should either destroy the organism or be repaired during the suspended animation or after defrosting. Somehow, these worms manage to survive. It's a mysterious enigma." End quote. When she was asked about the safety of these and whether we should be bringing ancient creatures back to life, she said the following: "As a result of the ongoing thawing of the permafrost, organisms preserved in it find their way back into the modern ecosystem every year. It's a natural process. We simply follow nature and do nothing that doesn't happen in the natural environment." End quote. Some people voiced their concern about this though, with one person saying the following: "With everything that's recently happened, do we really need to be doing stuff like this? I understand it's impressive, but is this really the best time?" End quote. While another person said this: "We understand how cool and powerful Mother Nature is. We lived through it recently. We really don't need to be bringing things back to life that lived on this planet tens of thousands of years ago." End quote. Or this person simply said, "Do you want Jurassic Park? Because this is how you get Jurassic Park. I have a bad feeling about this." End quote. It seems that this isn't the only thing that Russian scientists are working on. A few years back, it was announced by a team of researchers in Russia, along with South Korea, that they've been working on bringing back prehistoric creatures. The scientists are currently carrying out research in a lab that costs $5.9 million. The scientists hope to study animals that were once extinct from the living cells, saying that they want to be able to move on to restore the creatures. Some of the animals they are studying include the cave lion, woolly mammoth, woolly rhino, and species of horses that went extinct. Scientists from Harvard and Russia have already delved into mixing genes to bring back species that are extinct. And they've said they want to put woolly mammoth genes into an Asian elephant, and they plan to do this by 2021. Some have suggested this could be the start of something huge, with people putting forward the idea that we will eventually have many extinct species roaming our planet once again. So what do you make of these interesting stories? Man has created many technological wonders, the State Route 71 being one of them. It's arguably one of the most impressive aircrafts that we've created, even more so when you consider it was created during the 1960s. The Blackbird was designed, developed, and manufactured by the famous Lockheed Corporation. At the time of being made, the State Route 71 was developed under a black project and was led by Kelly Johnson, who was head of Lockheed Skunk Works units located in Burbank, California. What the team created was a plane that was able to reach speeds of 3,529 kilometers per hour, or 2,200 miles per hour. As mentioned on NASA's website, 2 State Route 71 aircrafts are being used by NASA as testbeds for high speed. The aircraft in SR-71A and an SR-71B pilot trainer aircraft are based at NASA's Dryden Flight Research Center. They have been loaned to NASA by the U.S. Air Force. Developed for the United States Air Force as reconnaissance aircraft more than 30 years ago, SR-71s are still the world's fastest and highest flying production aircraft. The aircraft can fly more than 2,200 miles per hour, Mach 3 plus or more than 3 times the speed of sound, and at altitudes of over 85,000 feet. This operating environment makes the aircraft excellent platforms to carry out research and experiments in a variety of areas: aerodynamics, propulsion, structures, thermal protection materials, high-speed and high-temperature instrumentation, atmospheric studies, and sonic boom characterization. Data from the State Route 71 High-Speed Research Program will be used to aid designers of future supersonic, hypersonic aircraft and propulsion systems, including a high-speed civil transport. The State Route 71 program at Dryden is part of NASA's overall high-speed aeronautical research program, and projects involve other NASA research centers, other government agencies, universities, and commercial firms. However, this incredible plane was retired by the Air Force in 1990. Something interesting to note is that no State Route 71 has ever been lost or damaged. One sentence that's often accompanied with this plane is that it's too fast for enemies to take down. The main reason given for why this plane was put into retirement is because of high costs, saying that in today's money, this plane would cost somewhere in the region of $250 million. As of right now, this plane is the fastest that man has ever created. Or is it? Whispers of Black Project aircraft have been around for years now. And bearing in mind that the State Route 71 was created over 60 years ago, it makes you wonder what we have now. Its replacement is said to be the Aurora. Although it's important to note that the U.S. government has denied that the aircraft exists. Eyewitnesses, however, have gone against this. Back in 1991, residents located in Southern California heard a series of unusual sonic booms, and interestingly, the United States Geological Survey even picked them up on their sensors. NASA and the Air Force came forward and said it wasn't their SR-71B, as it was not operating on the day the booms happened. Former NASA sonic boom expert Don Magaliri, who went on to study the sonic boom data at the California Institute of Technology, said that the data showed this craft was at an altitude of around 90,000 feet and was hitting Mach 5. Mach 5 means it was going 6,174 kilometers per hour, or 3,836 miles per hour. It's these types of stories that back up the claims that the Aurora project is genuine. There's said to be one more craft that's even faster than this. Another craft that's also shrouded in mystery is that of the mysterious Black Triangle, also known by some as the TR-3B Black Manta. These black triangles are associated with UFOs and have been reported for the last few decades by people from various locations across our planet. In fact, researchers have said that some of the most common UFOs reported sightings of them follow a similar theme. People report seeing giant triangular objects in the sky that are completely silent. Sometimes they're just sitting in the sky motionless, while others are seen leaving a location at extremely high speeds. Interestingly, those who have researched these objects have said they come in waves, and that for a short period of time many people will report seeing them. There have been around 4,000 reports of the triangle since the 1990s in the UK alone. There have also been waves of triangles in Belgium, France, Holland, and Germany. Now there is some confusion between the Aurora aircraft and the mysterious Black Triangle. Some researchers have said the two are actually different, saying that there's various differences. For example, eyewitnesses say the Aurora aircraft gives off unusual sonic booms, can be seen leaving contrails, and doesn't come close to the ground. The Black Triangles, however, don't appear to make any sound at all, are able to hover motionless and close to the ground, are said to be much faster than any aircraft ever witnessed, and don't leave behind contrails. Pilots have even come forward with their encounters with these mysterious black triangles, with one pilot detailing that while flying over Florida in a passenger plane, a silent large triangular-shaped craft passed above his plane. He estimated that the craft in question was easily going at speeds exceeding 2,500 miles per hour and said that he's never seen anything like it before. One of the problems with this aircraft is that we know it exists, and those who debated the topic aren't sure which is more impressive: The fact that our government owns a craft that's able to travel at these incredible speeds, or that it belongs to something unknown. Various questions remain though. How are these crafts able to hover motionless in the sky without making a sound? How can they go from a standstill to thousands of miles prior within seconds? And why does no one seem to know anything about them? Another mystery surrounding these crafts is that they're able to seemingly sneak into restricted airspace. Chris Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence during the Clinton and George W. Bush administrations, said that these black triangles had been observed flying over bases, only for the Air Force to scramble jets to chase them off. With these black triangles being able to easily outmaneuver these jets, it's incredible to think it was only back in 1903 that the Wright brothers had their first flight. Fast forward 60 years and we had the incredibly quick and sophisticated State Route 71. It's unbelievable that within the span of just 60 years we were able to achieve what we did. It's been 60 years since the State Route 71 was created. So is it really out of the realm of possibilities that we would be able to create something much faster than the State Route 71? So what do you make of these mysterious aircrafts? And what do you make of the Aurora aircraft and the mysterious black triangles? The first fossils were discovered surrounding that of the megalodon shark. The finding more than took the world by storm, as many all across the planet wrestled with the idea of a prehistoric Earth at one time housing massive sharks the size of whales and what that may have meant for the diverse ancient marine life that existed alongside the now extinct creature during the height of its reign. The size of the megalodon is often disputed among researchers. The data suggests that this shark grew to lengths of up to 60 feet or 18.2 meters in length, while some researchers suggest that it could have reached a maximum length of 80 feet or 24.3 meters. One thing scientists have agreed on, though, is that this giant shark is extinct. Though many would remark that the stars of the megalodon made it an incredible predator, they helped to allow the creature to dominate the oceans during its reign. The truth is that the creature's large stature actually proved to be more of a hindrance in nature than an actual benefit. In order to support its massive body weight and muscle growth, the body of the megalodon had a tremendous metabolism that only caused the creature to require massive amounts of food and resources, constantly available in its environment in order to not starve to death. This calorie requirement would have forced the megalodon to eat more than 2,500 pounds of meat per day just to survive, making it next to impossible to not starve if the creature found itself in an area void of a large abundance of natural prey. Given the fact that the diet of this massive shark was made up of mostly whales, turtles, and seals, the megalodon would have been forced to be in a constant state of hunting just to meet its daily calorie requirements, even going as far as possibly eating its own young in terms of stress, and engaging in risky behaviors just to locate a possible food source that would most likely deplete in a short matter of time. Given the fact that the megalodon often traveled over vast distances, this led to high probabilities of winding up in new areas that did not contain an adequate food source, and ultimately left the entire species incredibly vulnerable. These problems are only made worse when you take into consideration how an environment can easily be changed by season, which often meant that the megalodon would have been forced to travel greater distances, or be highly susceptible to starvation if any dramatic changes in climate occurred. Even with this explanation, though, fishermen and others have claimed to have seen giant sharks that dwarf the size of the great white shark, causing some to question whether this giant shark really did go extinct, or whether a new large species of shark is out there roaming our oceans. Although this theory seems unlikely, 2019 saw the discovery of a new species of whale, specifically a newly found baleen whale, which was found in the Gulf of Mexico. Dubbed Rice's whale, this animal can reach a staggering 42 feet in length, residing in the Gulf for the entire duration of the year. So it just shows us that even a 42-foot-long whale can go undiscovered in the modern day. Some of the most interesting reports, though, are those that are backed up with photographic evidence, and some have claimed they found images of a megalodon. This image is currently being shared around cryptid groups, asking whether or not it shows a megalodon. The image is usually shared with a caption saying that it was taken from a plane window, while other commenters have said it was taken from Google Earth. It's not known where the image was taken, but those who've seen the photograph have said it clearly shows a large animal, noting that the photograph was taken from high in the sky. One user said the following: "I know scientists are against the idea of there being a megalodon shark, but what if this is what we're seeing? Or what about if there's another shark species not yet known to science? I know people don't like this idea, but every year we discover many new species. Who's to say that there's not a large shark out there that hasn't yet been discovered?" End quote. Others, though, said the image isn't very clear, so it's hard to make out what it is, with some saying that it could be a whale. This, however, started an interesting discussion. With users sharing their stories they found online of people who claimed to have encountered a megalodon shark. Back in 1981, an Australian researcher, David Stead, was writing his book, Sharks and Rays of the Australian Seas, who'd often find himself listening to the stories of local fishermen all throughout the area, of whom would tell interesting tales and point to the natural habitats of strange sea-dwelling creatures. One such story, however, included an encounter with a terrifyingly large shark. According to the fishermen, they all claimed to have seen a shark that they described as being more than 100 feet in length, with a head that was as large as the roof of the wolf's shed located at Nelson's Bay. The fishermen claimed that as they were in deep waters, laying a number of crayfish pods, the massive shark had surfaced only for a brief moment, to show its size and carried away the pots in its mouth, despite the pots being more than 3 feet in diameter. Not only did this terrify the fishermen, but it led them refusing to visit their prime fishing location for several days, as they were terrified that the shark would return and swallow their boat. Though many refused to believe their story, the fishermen still stuck to their tale, warned many others of whom attempted to search for the monster to merely leave it. Another story told of fishermen who refused to enter the area when they saw a huge shark take out one of their nets. This giant shark also destroyed all of their gear and nearly sunk their bones. The reports came from lifelong fishermen veterans, and not from amateurs unaware of the ocean life around them, more than familiar with whales and already known species of sharks to have prevented them from being frightened. Despite this experience, they claim that the shark they saw was far larger than any other shark they've witnessed. According to the gathered information from a researcher, the shark in question was believed to be at least 50 feet in length and was gray in color. As of right now, scientists stick to the fact that the megalodon shark is extinct and say that these sightings could be explained as the fishermen seeing large sharks during the nighttime, giving off the illusion of them being bigger than what they actually are. With over 85% of the ocean remaining unexplored, though, some have said we should have an open mind. So what do you make of these interesting stories? If there's one single event that could single-handedly wipe out humans, it's that of the Yellowstone supervolcano. Yellowstone National Park is home to some of the most breathtaking views. According to the National Park Service, Yellowstone National Park is the second most visited national park in the United States, with the first being the Great Smoky Mountains. Last year, approximately 3.8 million visitors went to the park, with that number being much lower than the previous year. However, this is thought to be because of everything that's been happening recently. There's one attraction at the park, though, that brings in many visitors, and this is the supervolcano that lurks beneath the park. It's arguably the most famous supervolcano, and the one that's received the most media attention, and for good reason. This supervolcano has had at least 3 very large eruptions, being 2.1 million years ago and 640,000 years ago, while the other one happened 3 million years ago, but was said to have been not as bad as the other two. The most recent news is that yesterday a surge of magma was detected coming into the Yellowstone system, mainly at Yellowstone Lake. UNAVCO.org, who are made up of scientists, educators, and professionals, released a spectrogram which showed a surge of magma. The red shows the heat of the magma, with the blue surroundings showing the cooler areas. Something interesting to note is that the researchers pointed out that the region in which the magma flow was detected was also one of the regions that was hit by various earthquakes. Back in late 2020, Yellowstone officials said that 125 earthquakes had hit the region in less than 1 week. with scientists further saying that these earthquakes hit a region that's already weakened by years of magmatic activity. The earthquake tore through the region in most of September, with officials saying that they recorded 125 tremors, most of which were detected southeast of West Thumb in Yellowstone National Park. This has caused some to panic, though, as it's thought the supervolcano could be due from eruption, as the last time it erupted was over 640,000 years ago. Although some joking said that the Yellowstone supervolcano erupting could be the final boss of 2021, the reality is if this supervolcano was to erupt, it would cause irreversible damage. Recently, University of Utah's Robert Smith made an interesting discovery, saying that he noticed a change in the water levels at Yellowstone Lake. Whenever there's these types of changes, it's always important for further tests to be carried out. Geologist Dr. Robert Christensen then revealed the discovery during a documentary. He said the following: one of the most interesting additional pieces of data came along after the early fieldwork and the completion of the initial geologic studies. Bob Smith at the University of Utah was interested in seeing if we could look for signs of contemporary deformation in the Yellowstone caldera. He had recognized some of these indications, particularly in changes in lake levels of different parts of Yellowstone Lake, and because it's so large, he felt there were indications that the lake basin itself was being tilted. Because of this, the lake level was rising at one end of the lake and falling at the other end. End quote. Dr. Christensen explained how his colleagues made the discovery, going on to say the following. He was interested in seeing whether we could actually measure this by some direct means. So one of the things I did at the time was to get funding together to get the USGS Topography Division involved. We felt that with as much deformation as there appeared to be, that there should be measurable changes in elevations in the past. We finally got the funding together and got that survey done, and the data was provided to Bob Smith and his group, and they in turn integrated it into a series of elevation changes throughout the caldera. They demonstrated that the caldera over a 50-year period in time had come up around 2/3 of a meter. Either the magma was intruding the crust or was heating the hydrothermal system, causing it to expand and elevate the crust. Something was going on. End quote. Another interesting discovery was made back in 2019, when researchers said that a 465-mile-long piece of molten rock is rising directly underneath Yellowstone. Scientists had this to say: "We are closely monitoring a 465-mile-long piece of molten rock rising below the Yellowstone caldera. We have discovered the Yellowstone's magma chamber is slowly rising each year. The danger will be if the plumes start liquefying and moving up faster. Typically, when these eruptions begin, they begin from a certain event. Then they get larger as they move along the fracture system. The entire sequence that formed the last Yellowstone eruption may have taken as little as 2 weeks. Another thing to note is that it's not only Yellowstone where activity is picked up. Seismologists and volcanologists have noticed that the world's volcanic activity has dramatically increased in recent years. Volcanoes from all around the world are erupting faster and more frequently than ever. On top of this, earthquakes are also on the rise. So why is this happening? As of right now, researchers have said there isn't a concrete answer and that more studies need to be carried out. Data has shown us that in the 20th century alone, there were over 3,500 volcanic eruptions. That works out as around 30 eruptions per year. Not only this, but earthquakes are also on the rise. In 2018 alone, there was over 14,000 earthquakes. And researchers and scientists have suggested that the world could be preparing for some kind of world-changing megatremor. If this does happen, it's said it will have the power to split up continents. As you can imagine, when this news got released, people started to ask questions. One of them being, when is Yellowstone going to erupt next? Seismologists have said if there was an eruption at Yellowstone, there would be mass destruction. They also stated that this supervolcano will erupt again. However, the likelihood of the volcano erupting anytime soon is very slim. In fact, the U.S. Geological Survey seismologists are among those monitoring the site and said that locals in the region would have lots of warning before anything happened. In fact, it's thought we would have over a decade's notice before the volcano erupted. Yellowstone is the volcano that everyone focuses on because it's one of the biggest and would cause the most destruction. If it did erupt, the effects would be felt across the world. So what do you make of this most recent discovery at the Yellowstone National Park? Various militaries have played a key role in the history of civilization. But it's surprising what you learn when you look into the many inventions and important people that have changed the course of our history over the years. So today, we'll be taking a look at some of the inventions and events that you might not know about. GBU-24 Paveway 3 GBU-24 Paveway 3, also known more simply as the GBU-24, is a unit of laser-guided bombs, a descendant of the bigger Raytheon Paveway 3 group of weaponry. The Paveway group of weapons can also be guided by a seeker package which is incorporated into the nose of the bomb, as well as being stabilized and used at greater distances by the addition of a wing kit to its rear. In comparison to the GBU-10 family or the Paveway 2 family, the GBU-24 has the capability to be used at much greater distances by utilizing much more efficient guidance technology than its predecessors. Due to the expense of the Paveway 3 guidance technology, however, it's usually only used against higher value targets. The GBU-24 Paveway 3 was introduced back in 1983 and is used by the USAF, the US Navy, US Marine Corps, and by various other NATO air forces around the world. 23 of the bombs were used by the US Navy in the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The Paveway family of weapons has been heavily used in the Gulf. Pilots also used the GBU-27 Paveway 3 and gave it the nickname the Hammer because of its destructive power and blast radius. The Paveway series of weapons are renowned for their power and previous successful operations. The bomb is able to home in on its targets using a spot of pulse-coded laser energy, which can be given off by the aircraft that's carrying it, another aircraft in the form of buddy lasing or a ground unit which acts as a ground laser designator. After being dropped by the carrying aircraft, the thermal battery which powers the guidance computer group is utilized to supply power. The arming wire for the fuse is withdrawn, the wings are released, and depending on the configuration, either the turbine generator or the safety switch which powers the fuse is activated. Once this has happened, the seeker technology guides the bomb toward the intended target. Should the laser illumination be lost, the Paveway 3 will stop following its guidance and follow a rough ballistic path, although the bomb can wander off the course of its original target. While this does have a guidance system, however, it is not a weapon which is powered by a propulsion. The effectiveness and range of the weapon is largely due to other key factors relating primarily to the carrying aircraft, i.e. aircraft speed, altitude and wind speed, etc. The bomb is cleared for use on aircraft such as the Eurofighter Typhoon, F-14 Tomcat, Mirage 2000 and the Panavir Tornado. The Rhino, a bizarre experimental all-terrain vehicle, 1954. Greek-American inventor Eli Agonides was well known for his wacky, experimental, and imaginative inventions, and he amassed a considerable fortune for doing so. One of his more experimental and unusual inventions was the Rhino all-terrain vehicle, which he debuted in 1954. The Rhino was created as a dominant off-road vehicle, which could easily patrol the desolate, unforgiving terrains of Alaska and Canada. The Rhino weighed 5 tons and would max out at around 45 miles per hour on the highways. It had huge front wheels, each measuring 6 feet in diameter and weighing 1,500 pounds. Each of the wheels were hollow, cast in a hemispherical shape, which gave the Rhino its ability to deal with all terrains. Whether the Rhino would have to deal with snow, mud, or sand, the rigged wheels of the Rhino would sink into the terrain's surface, giving the wheel much better traction. Aside from the vehicle's ability to carve its way through rough terrain, it also had a low center of gravity, which meant the vehicle was agile, able to tip 75 degrees on either side without toppling over. The massive hollow wheels also acted as floats, meaning the Rhino could easily wade through water, utilizing a rear water jet which provided the vehicle its propulsion. Around 4 miles per hour. The Marmon Harrington Company of Indianapolis built a prototype of the Rhino to be used for demonstration purposes. It did gain a lot of interest initially, but the bigger contract Agonides was chasing never came. The United States military declined to make a purchase because they were concerned about the wheels being punctured by enemy gunfire, which would have caused the vehicle to sink in water. Though it was a wacky and fun civilian combat and it failed to gain traction with investors. The U.S. military had to politely ask Aganatus to stop calling them, and his invention ultimately failed. Though his invention had failed, however, it wasn't for the lack of trying. Aganatus has since gained a reputation as an imaginative and successful inventor. When Queen Elizabeth was a truck mechanic, 1945. When Britain declared war with Germany in 1939, those close to the British royal family were deeply concerned for their safety. Many around them wanted them to leave Britain and find refuge for the duration of the war in Canada. But the Queen Mother refused. Even though Buckingham Palace was bombed numerous times, the Queen Mother and her daughters were kept safe. They had managed to take up residence in different places before eventually settling in Windsor Castle. In 1945, intense fighting was still ongoing throughout Europe, and as the Princess Elizabeth turned 18, she would take up her own role. She insisted that she be allowed to help the war effort and was commissioned as an honorary second subaltern in the Auxiliary Territorial Service, which was essentially a role similar to that of a second lieutenant. And she quickly began her training in March 1945. Her father, the king, declared that she should be given no special privilege or rank. However, she did earn a promotion to become a junior commander. As she endured her training, the Associated Press reported that she was the first woman in the royal family to be a full-time active member in the women's service. Despite playing a role in the war, it wasn't a combat role. The service did carry its own set of risks. In 1942, a member of the ATS was taken out by a bomb after serving at an anti-aircraft station. As women around Britain looked to aid the wartime effort, there was no shortage of volunteers. Sir Winston Churchill's daughter, Mary, also served in the ATS. The princess took her role seriously. Once she had joined, she passed a military driving test, learned to read road maps, and also worked on repairing engines as both a mechanic and as a driver. Despite her role, however, her position in the royal family was a cause for concern, and it wasn't long before she was back under guard. She didn't stay in the camp with the other women in the But what do you make of these historical photographs?